one of my roles there is professional preparation for our students. You see that we're offering Working While Black Career Series. This is the third of 4 series that we're doing as a result, of course, of recent events that have happened around and about. My colleague, Linda Lenore, who is an assistant director at the center, she and I have put together programming, and we hope to continue to do so in semesters to come. But just wanted to say, we're all aware of the recent events and high-profile events that have taken place around the globe, across our nation, and even on our campus. That has brought a lot of attention to the fact that racial bias leads to racial injustice. So our Working While Black Career Series is developed to provide our students with guidance and advice and resources so you all can be prepared to navigate challenges that you might encounter, and also to thrive and to show up and to show out and to shine in your career journey. Our panelists are going to share their experiences with you. And I'm really excited that our panel is going to be moderated by Keith Alexander. I'm going to give a super brief introduction because there's so much to say, and that actually is the case with all of our panelists. But Keith is a Pulitzer Prize winning crime and courts reporter for the Washington Post. He didn't really want me to mention the Pulitzer Prize part, but he earned that Pulitzer because of a project that he worked on, which highlighted, he was part of a team that collected data and did research in 2015 of all the fatal police shootings. And the results of that research show, of course, a drastic difference in how race plays out in police shootings and other related events. So I wanted to say all that, and without further ado, I'll introduce Keith, who will introduce you to the rest of the panelists. Sorry, I forgot to say one thing. We are recording this for anyone who needs to know. And also, we're gonna ask students, you're gonna see posted a link that we're gonna ask you to register and indicate that you attended this event. So it's sort of, if you've come to events at the Career Center before, it's like swiping in, just to let us know that you were here. Thank you very much. And Keith, go ahead, thanks.
Lily Woods, thank you very much for this very topical discussion, and we appreciate this. And what we're going to do is also, yes, we'll introduce the panelists, but I also want the guests, the students, to, if you have questions, please submit a question in the chat room. We're going to take your questions throughout the evening, and no question is off limits. So by all means, your students, you have questions, things that you want to bring up, by all means, hit the chat button, type it away, and we'll get to them. So let's introduce the panelists for this evening. First off, Ms. Stephanie Brody. Stephanie Brody is a research practitioner with Tool Design Group of Silver Spring, Maryland, where she specializes in transportation planning and policy. Ms. Brody's research has informed decision-making in transportation, especially how to incorporate equity and other social substantiability considerations into transportation decisions. Stephanie completed her BS in civil engineering at the University of Maryland and obtained a master's of city and regional planning and an MS and a PhD. A whole lot of initials there. BS, MS, PhD. Y'all got that? She earned it in civil engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Again, that would be Ms. Stephanie Brody. Also joining us this evening will be Omar Eaton Martinez. Mr. Eaton Martinez leads the Prince George's County Parks and Recreational Historical Resources, which include Historical House Museums and Aviation Museum, the Black History Program, and Archaeological Parks. Mr. Martinez, he also received his BA from the University of Maryland and is currently pursuing a PhD in American Studies right here at the University of Maryland. Another doctor. Mr. Brandon Lucas is a technology consultant with PwC, whom some of you may recognize as a 2019 graduate of University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business. Brandon interned with PwC during his last year at Maryland and now helps their technology, media, and telecommunications customers drive their business objectives through innovative technology. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Victor Powell. Victor Powell is an elementary school principal in Alexandria City Public Schools. He is a dedicated leader in public education who has served at the elementary, middle, high school, and university levels as a teacher, instructor, or school administrator. Victor received his bachelor's in elementary education from Anderson University and his master's in education leadership and supervision from Ball State University. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into it. Our goal this evening, as Lydia says, is to prepare the students for situations that they might encounter once they go out to the workforce or while they're in the workforce, and to instill confidence, based on that preparation. So let's start off this evening's discussion by getting right into this, if we can. How has your individual organizations responded to the social unrest and the whole Black Lives Matter movement? What have you seen? What have you all been doing as a result of what's been going on? And Ms. Lenore, I think we'll start with you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
My internet goes in and out, but go ahead and say that again.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, we wanted to find out which the various institutions are doing involving the whole Black Lives Matter, what's going on social unrest. And I pointed you, but I actually met Ms. Brody. Ms. Brody, if we can start with you.
But that that's okay.
Okay, we'll come back. Ms. Brody, we want to start with you if we can.
All right, yes. So I am at Tool Design Group, which is a civil engineering consulting firm in Silver Spring, Maryland. And a lot of what we focus on is bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So supporting people who are walking and biking. And in that, generally, it's an opportunity for us to look at how we can expand transportation to all people. So biking and walking is usually a lower barrier to entry in terms of financial, in terms of the financial aspect. And as an organization, equity has always kind of been a part of it. So we're a smaller company, just 200 people now, but equity has been kind of on our talking list for a while now. And this summer, a lot of what we've done is to kind of shift to be more active about actually being anti-racist. So how we can use our work to not just kind of promote and ensure equity, but to actually kind of question and push back on our clients to kind of look at how they can be more active as well. So we work with a lot of cities, states, and metropolitan areas to provide these services. So really kind of helping our clients find more ways to be more active. And then in terms of internally towards our staff, the company has set up spaces for Black staff to gather and talk, as well as to have a direct communication with the president of the organization.
And thank you for that, Ms. Brody. I also want to ask, as you're talking and laying out some of the things that your various organizations are doing, if you can give some examples.
Sure.
So Ms. Brody, if you can give some examples as to, you said you're working with customers outside your office. Can you give an example as to what exactly you all did to address this situation?
Yeah, so I'll say one example, we're working with DC, the District of Columbia, and one of the projects that I'm working on is their long range plan. So they're trying to plan how they'll improve transportation for the next 5-10 years. And as a part of that, what we're working on is creating a framework for them that is basically an equity framework that they'll look at all of their projects within. So I'm helping them to identify performance measures that will let them that will essentially integrate equity into all their decision making. So instead of having to kind of add on equity at the end, it's something that's just baked into their process. For the internal example, monthly, the president of the company actually has a water cooler talk where Black staff can sign on, and she'll talk with us, just kind of have a conversation to see how we're doing, and then as things come up, we're able to have like a direct conversation with her.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for that. Mr. Martinez, what's happening in PG County, Parks and Recreation?
Hello, everyone. Well, we've been responding in multiple ways. I would like to start by acknowledging that the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission issued a resolution talking about the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. And in that resolution, they gave an historical connection, kind of illustrating to everyone that this idea of racial violence is part of a continuum, that these are not blips in the matrix, that these are things that have been happening to us for hundreds of years, which I thought was a very powerful way to respond to this moment. What we also did in my division, I'm the Assistant Division Chief for Historic Resources for the Natural and Historic Resource Division for the Department of Parks and Recreation, Prince George's County, which is part of the larger Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission. And what we decided to do is we did a whole social justice week of social media posts on our Prince George's Parks history page, where I issued a statement, and then we followed with some posts that were tied into the histories that we teach at our sites. We also have a huge event that we do every year called Juneteenth. Some people may have heard of it. And what we usually do is we have 6,000 people that come to Watkins Park. This year, obviously, we were not able to do that. But in lieu of that, we decided to create a virtual event. A series of events, actually, is what we did. But we also didn't want to just sit in the moment and not respond to what was happening. And so we created a panel called the I Can't Breathe panel that I moderated, where we invited historians, we invited Africana studies scholars, psychologists. We had our chief of park police on there. We had two young activists from an organization called Stand Up at Prince George's County. And we had a very frank conversation about the legacies of enslavement and how those things connect to racial violence today, which I know that you've written about in earnest. And so those are some of the ways that we began to respond to this moment that we're now starting to call COVID-16-19.
And the program, you called it the I Can't Breathe program. For those viewers who may not know where that term I Can't Breathe came from, would you like to share that, please?
Certainly. So most recently, it was the plea, it was the cry of George Floyd, who was mercilessly murdered with a knee on his neck by a police officer. But we also know that I Can't Breathe comes from Eric Garner. We also know that I Can't Breathe comes from a history of lynching. This is not the first time, unfortunately, that people of African descent have had to cry that out.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate hearing that. Mr. Lucas, talk about what's happening there with PwC, and also talk a little bit about PwC, please.
For sure. So one thing that I'll mention is that we are such a large firm that there's things that happen at the large firm level, as well as things that are happening on your individual projects. And so as a firm, we decided that we wanted to not only have conversations about what's going on, but we also wanted to take action. And so our CEO and our leadership team have come up with 6 different initiatives that will allow us to address what's going on in our country. So I won't touch base on all 6 of them, but just a few that are highlight is one, we've decided to be more self-aware and just more present about our diversity and inclusion numbers. So instead of having those numbers just secured to our HR team, we've allowed the whole body of PwC to know this is how many minorities we have in leadership positions, or this is how many women we have in leadership positions, so that we are just that transparent and able to figure out how much ground do we need to cover to, make our firm more representative. Another thing that we're doing is providing pro bono services to organizations who have a mission that includes, diversity and inclusion initiatives. So we're actually able to take time away from our projects and spend some time helping nonprofits or other organizations build their brand, their practice, or whatever it is to help further their goals. And just in addition to that, something that I'll add is that although we have a diversity and inclusion team, this is the first time where we actually invited staff, so people that are just very new to the firm, like myself, all the way up to managers, directors, to actually apply to committee and have conversations about what it is that our firm can do to improve our culture. And then just at a team level, it's been very cool to see people that I work with come alongside one another and really just supporting one another, ask how you're doing, and just be vulnerable and have these conversations that can sometimes be very uncomfortable.
Can you tell a little bit, just like a sentence or two, no more than two, just what PwC actually does for those who might not be familiar with the company?
For sure. So PwC is a professional services firm where clients will hire us to come in and do a variety of different services. So largely it's accounting services or tax preparation. And then where I work is in our advisory arm, which can vary from management consulting, technology consulting, or maybe cybersecurity.
Got it. All right. Thank you very much for that. Mr. Powell, the Alexandria City School public school system. Tell us a little bit about what's happening down there, please.
Sure. So one, thank you for even having me on. I think this is an awesome platform for students in higher education. We're doing a plethora of things. I would start with at 15,000 feet as far as our strategic plan. Just this past year, we adopted a new strategic plan through 2025 that has it at the heart of everything. Our conversations start with race. So it's built into everything that we do starts with the conversation of race, whether that's our instruction, whether that's our family engagement, whether that's the policies that we have. Adopting that, our school board, to me, took a bold step with making sure that everything we do in our district starts with race, which was very shocking considering the demographics and even anything like that taking place in Northern Virginia. So to me, a huge step to move in the right direction. So beyond that, we've been engaged in our equity work at ACPS, I would say at least for the last 3 or 4 years. And I would say in a serious way. I think a lot of people have professional development or trainings and call it diversity trainings. But really, what does that look like as far as the panelists said earlier, as far as really being action oriented around being anti-racist? So that's the stance that we've taken. Yes, it's nice to have a statement. It's nice to have trainings. It's nice to have different things for people to participate in, and even discussions. And those things are all things that we're doing. But what does that look like as far as how it ultimately impacts our instruction? And how is that aligned to our school improvement plans, the trainings that we're doing, but also what does that look like as far as the instructional delivery that our students ultimately have and are exposed to as far as K-12 or really pre-K-12. So those are things that more 15,000 feet. Also, I would say something that we're doing along with our strategic plan is reviewing our policies in our district. Most districts, or really most institutions, have policies that perpetuate inequities, especially in education. And so we're doing a deep dive and calling in a third party this year and really reviewing our policies across the board in ACPS, and really reviewing what are some policies that we have that we can't point at the community, we can't point at society, we have to point the finger at ourselves. What are some things that are in our policies that over time, historically, have perpetuated these inequities? And again, I don't want to give somebody a history lesson, but the district and where I serve, if anybody's ever seen the movie Remember the Titans, that's where I work. So that work is still being done today. We're still dismantling. I'm not, Denzel Washington didn't go to T.C. Williams, but his character, as far as Coach Boone, those are real life people. That school is where my students end up pouring into. So not just from a Hollywood standpoint, this is the work and service that I live and breathe on a regular basis. And so really, asking the hard questions and really kind of dismantling some of those things and really looking at the policy, because like anything else, as far as public education or nationally, what are the laws, what are the policies that govern the things that we do as a society or as a structural organization? Those are the things that also need to be dealt with outside of the people, if you will. So those are things that we're doing.
And what's the percentage of African-American students there at ACPS?
So I want to say our largest population is our Hispanic students. Our African-American population is probably around 30 or 40%. So we're majority minority, which is a misnomer for most people in the DMV area. They usually look at Northern Virginia and think the opposite. But we're actually majority, I don't like the word minority. We're majority people of color, I would say, in our district, which is something that most people don't realize for ACPS in this area. We're actually the most diverse district in the DMV area when you look at demographics.
And you said Latino was the largest. What percentage is that?
I would say around 40 to 45. I would say African American is probably around like 30 to 35. But whites or Caucasian individuals are of the minority in our school district. The city demographics don't align with that. It's still not majority white, but it's still majority students of color or people of color in the city. It's just when you get to like Old Town, and I don't know how much people are familiar with the city of Alexandria, because it's very different than Alexandria Fairfax, which also gets confused. So that's a whole nother topic. But
let me ask you this quick question here, because you touched on this, and I just wanted to give you one example. If I'm trying to get at least one example. You talked about trying to do away with lessons or institution that perpetuates inequities. Can you give an example, other than Remember the Titans, but can you give a modern day example of some of those initiatives that perpetuate ethnic?
Yeah, I could give a few. I was about to go.
Give us one or two. We don't have time for a few. One or two.
I'll give one. I think the first one and the easy one, low hanging fruit, is talented and gifted. I don't care what district you've ever served in. I don't care what district you've ever gone to as a kid. Talented and gifted has been one that perpetually is something that shuts out our students of color based on culturally biased assessments, and really looking at what are the practices and structures that we have in place that our students are getting into AP classes, are getting into elementary talented and gifted programs, are getting into things that we call, at least at the elementary level, young scholars. That's the pipeline for students of color getting into talented and gifted, and really reviewing those practices so that we're affecting that change now and not waiting for 2025. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So these are incredible examples here, but I guess even at the Washington Post, even the Washington Post, we had to look internally. We were out here reporting on these stories, on these various initiatives that you all are doing, but we had to also look internally about the stories that we're covering, our hiring, making sure that there's a diverse mix of stories that deal with African Americans and people of color on all aspects, not just Metro, but on page one in style and finance. So this is something that is happening literally in corporations and companies and businesses and politics across the country. I'm also being told, though, that things are starting to wane, that the initiative that was alive and well back over the summer, particularly in May after George Floyd, is now starting to show signs of wear and tear. That some companies are now saying, we've done this for the summer, going into 21 may not be as much of a priority. Are any of you all seeing or hearing any of this? And if so, how are you responding? Anyone?
Well, I'll jump in.
Thank you.
So our company is actually, I'm very impressed. This is probably the first time that I've been at a company or at an organization that is really actively invested in equity. So just 2 weeks ago, we had a full staff meeting of the entire company, where we had breakout groups talking about DEI issues and how, as a company, we can address them, and the question was actually, how can we be an anti-racist company? So actually discussing that amongst the entire staff. So I think that, at least from my part, I see that there's the company is working to actually institutionalize it, which is really enlightening and heartening for me.
So no one is seeing any signs that this is a fad that is showing signs of fading?
No.
Okay.
I think the other point that I was going to bring up earlier was last Thursday we had a school board meeting, and our chief of police for Alexandria City was brought on. Every 2 years we renegotiate the MOU with our police department because we have police officers.
Can you explain what MOU is for those who might not be familiar?
Memorandum of Understanding. So basically it's a partnership and agreement that school districts have with the local police department, because police officers are embedded into our middle schools and high schools as SROs. If you don't know what an SRO is, a school resource officer. So really, what does that agreement look like? What are those understandings, if you will, as far as what the role of that police officer is, and in partnership with the school administrators and the staff there? What does that engagement piece look like? How are we developing relationships, and really hitting at the heart of a lot of the issues that we're seeing and have been seeing, as Omar said earlier, for years. This has been going on for centuries, if you will. So it's just perpetuated with new names as we go. But really, again, like I said earlier, getting at the heart of where the issues are and where that partnership is. So I don't see it waning. I think the pressure has to stay on from whatever the leadership is at, whether the organization or the local community, to continue to put pressure, and the people in the community to continue to put pressure. Thankfully, our parents and our staff have stayed, quote unquote, woke with, as somebody said earlier, not just the COVID-19, but the 16-19 pandemic. And I know there's also other pandemics that are going on that people might coin as well, but those are the two that I think are pertinent for our conversation.
Are any of you hearing any pushback from non-people of color? And I see hands shaking already. Okay, and what exactly is the pushback, and how is it being dealt with?
I would say in my organization, it's an interesting question, because to be honest with you, the Department of Parks and Recreation, Prince George's County, is pretty brown and black top to bottom, honestly. There's not a lot of white people in decision-making positions in that specific department. Now, the larger commission on the Montgomery County side in particular certainly has white leaders there. I would say that although the pushback doesn't always have to come from white people, let's just be transparent. Sometimes it comes from other people in leadership.
Ice Cube? Like Ice Cube? I'm sorry, Ice Cube? Ice Cube you're talking about?
Very much like O'Shea, just like O'Shea. And we have to manage up, right? I mean, sometimes there's trepidation on some of the programs we are doing. Although, before I say anything further, I just think it's fair to say that we've been preparing our staff to do this work pre-COVID, Breonna Taylor, and I mean, we've been really digging. So to the point now where our commission has leaned on our division to be a voice for these types of things, because we've been laying this out brick by brick, trying to build this foundation to do this work, which I think is super important to acknowledge. So it's less of there's sometimes we will interject new ideas, and all right, I'm gonna use this example. So we're gonna show this, we plan to show this documentary called The American Legacy on White Supremacy, right? Very explicit title. And we're in partnership with the Association of African American Museums to do this. There's a little bit of trepidation from one or two people, and now it hasn't been halted, but now we have to kind of do another review, although I've done all the review, but way before all this, right? So I'm just saying to you, sometimes even, it doesn't always have to be white people, right? Sometimes it's just people, and sometimes it's just people being super careful, right, which is fine, it's cool. But I mean, we've been doing this work, and I think we just have to acknowledge that and move forward with it.
So that's what you bring up a very good point. So taking race off the table, and Mr. Powell, will come back to you because I saw you vividly, nodding your head, but taking race off the table and just the people who push back. How do you deal with that pushback? How have you been able to get what you all want accomplished when people, regardless of race, are pushing against that?
I think, and it's just unique to our profession as far as educators, everything we do is built on relationships. everything when you're effective. So I think it has to start there. And then also, thankfully, because of the leadership that I have as far as superintendent on down to myself as a principal, we're allowed to speak and we're encouraged to speak our truths. So I'm encouraged to speak our truths to the white and Black community or Hispanic community when there are parents at my school and my community who won't even talk to me just because I'm a Black male. But I'm able to speak my truth in a PTA meeting or in my newsletter or in a staff meeting, because those things are a part of, as I said earlier, our strategic plan and supported by the leadership that we have. So I think those things coupled with building those relationships with individuals, which takes time, especially with parents, it takes time, and also helping them understand the why. And even when they disagree, still being civil. We can still disagree without being, mean or hurtful. And even when they are, to me, again, it's just the legacy that I like to follow in, which is love. I'm of that cloth of MLK or Cornel West. I'm still going to be able to see my truth, but I'm going to do it in a way that's respectful. So I think those are things, and also make sure we're in it for the long haul. These are not one-offs. As we've been saying this entire time, this discussion has been going on for years. You have to be in it for the long haul.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll give an example from my career journey in research. So I started out researching equity and transportation equity and trying to figure out basically how to I guess maybe market it to states and cities, because this is back 10 years ago when equity was not quite yet a buzzword. And a lot of what I was doing was trying to frame it in a way that was sustainability. Sustainability was the buzzword. So how can we incorporate equity into the sustainability conversation and make people use that as kind of like the Trojan horse, if you will, to get people to talk about it. And kind of now seeing how it is kind of the thing on everybody's talking list. I think the way that I have dealt with pushback has been to kind of pivot and then use the same thing, like continue to talk about equity, but kind of pivot to a point where people are willing to actually hear it and to incorporate it and to use it, and to kind of help me move my agenda forward by framing it in a way that they also see the benefits to it.
Awesome. Can you, and if you can share, maybe a personal example. Well, before you do that, again, to the students out there, if you have any questions that you want our panelists to either address or to answer, please just type it up and send it over into the chat room. We got about 45 minutes or so before we have to end this, but we want to make sure that we were addressing the issues that you have and the questions that you have. The panelists, can you share a challenge, a specific event, if you will, as an African American in the workplace, and then how you address that, and what came as a result of that challenge? And whoever wants to take it first.
I have an example from my days at the Smithsonian. I worked at the National Museum of American History. And for those of you who, just for clarity, I identify as a Puerto Rican of African descent. Now, I'm a Black man, but I am Puerto Rican. And I say that only because the example is relevant. So I was running the intern and fellow program when I would recruit students from College Park and many other institutions across the nation to do internships and do research fellowships at our institution. And one of the things that we were trying to fight for was more paid internships. And so our development staff, who's largely white, had gotten a donor who was interested in funding an internship for 5 years. So we spoke to the donor, we talked to them about the different projects students could work on. They had some ideas about what they wanted to support. And then what sort of started happening was, because the way I recruit, I'd always center people of color in all my recruitment, whether it's a PWI or a minority serving institution. We started getting more students who were selected who were people of color. And the development professional associated with this donor was trying to imply that this was a problem. And I told her, I said, in none of our past conversations was this ever brought up. These, all the projects that we've gotten have met all of the requirements or expectations of the donor. And basically what she was trying to say was, well, they don't want to make it seem like it's something for Latinos or whatever. I was like, there's nothing in here that's implied for Latinos. But just in case you were wondering, Latino history is American history, right? So this idea of managing up that people of color have to do until you retire, like that will never end. And so you're always managing up. You're always teaching people.
What does that mean, managing up?
Well, managing up specifically really means when you're trying to educate the people that you report to. Now, I didn't report to that woman, so that's not maybe the best use of that word. But I mean, in terms of like definitely educating your colleagues and the people that you do partner with to get certain projects done, you have to be able to educate them. You have to be able to enlighten them. But it was really interesting because they were walking on eggshells trying to explain themselves, because in reality, they knew they were wrong. And they knew they were out of pocket, and they knew that there was no good way to say it. But I mean, you just can't let that slide. You have to be able to with actual historical evidence and logistical common sense and love, like my good brother said, explain it to them. Like, this is not correct. I mean, we met everything, every compliant issue they wanted, we met. And now because we had a couple Latinos get selected, it's a problem? No, it can't be. It can't be.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that. Wow. Anyone else? Anyone else care to share?
Yeah,
Lucas?
One thing that I wanted to add is that, I think once you all get into the professional world, there's going to be situations where you're treated differently because of the color of your skin or your heritage, your culture. And I think one thing that's been important for me, and something that I always talk to students or colleagues about is, when you run into those situations, you can only manage yourself. There's nothing that you can do that can change that the way you react is what's important. And so I've been in situations where I work in a building where you have to badge into the elevator. And once you badge in, you kind of go to your floor. And I walked into an elevator where my floor was already badged. And so it seemed as if I was just walking in an elevator. Maybe it didn't work at the company. Mm-hmm. But when I got off the elevator, somebody looked at me head to toe and kind of just wanted to confirm that I was actually an employee of the company. And so situations like that kind of reminded me that I can handle that one or two ways. I can get discouraged. I can get upset. I can raise my voice and say, why are you treating me this way? But what I always try to encourage people to do is, because these situations will always happen to you. It can happen on the elevator, it can happen in a meeting, but you have to stay positive. You have to encourage yourself. You have to be able to take these situations and take it as a teaching point. A lot of people have used the word, coach up or manage up. And, sometimes it's an opportunity to really teach somebody and show grace and mercy. So for any of you all who have experienced something in the past where somebody mistreated you because of your race or culture, always take the opportunity to take a step back, reflect, show them grace and mercy, and teach them instead of blowing up the situation.
Isn't that sometimes even a test that sometimes managers or supervisors are testing you to see how are you going to respond when something like this presents itself? And are you going to pass this test, or are you going to be, a stereotype, or get angry, or be confrontational, or what have you? I mean, sometimes these are tests. Is that right, Mr. Powell?
I would definitely agree. I think I would concur with a lot of what Omar and Brandon said. The examples that kind of come to my mind as we talk about, navigating the professional setting. I do agree that it's in the response, but I also think you got to pick your battles and know when this is an opportunity to go forward with something. I know we'll probably get into this a little bit later in the discussion, but if there's any advice, or my number one, goal to help any professional navigate, not just these situations, but just professional setting or just life, is you need to have a mentor. And hopefully a mentor, if not in your profession, or one that's aligned to it. It may not be a part of your organization, but mentorship to me is at the very heart. And I keep telling relationships, but specifically mentorship, because those are the individuals that you can call on when those things happen. Do you have another principal colleague, or do you have an assistant principal or assistant superintendent to call on, like, hey man, this happened to me. You know, what are your thoughts? To know how can you talk to somebody else about these things? I think one of the hardest things for us as a community is to be the only one there and not have anybody to talk to about it, not have anybody to reflect on about this experience. And then you start thinking you're crazy. Like, is it me? Like, did I do something wrong? Or da-da-da-da-da? And I was like, no, like, this is what happened. And then those are the triggers that kind of give you advice on, should I take this to the next level? And then, like I said, be able to speak that truth and move forward. Or, as you said earlier, as far as, is this a test? And knowing that there's going to be plenty more, but how do I respond in those situations so that I can either win that person over? Because again, to me, love is patient, love is kind, it keeps, like, you have to be consistent. That's just my philosophy on it, because it will come. It's going to come. It's just, what are you going to do when it happens?
Yeah. And I definitely want to go. I'm sorry, somebody say something?
I was going to say that I'm glad that you brought up mentorship, Victor, because I think that there's how we react in this also. Like, if we are upset and we don't actually have someone to talk to, or aren't able to get off our chest, it's damaging to us as well. So having someone that you can talk to, that you can bounce ideas off, and you can make sure that you're not going crazy, basically. So I think that's very important. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And not only, this is a lesson I had to learn, the hard way. Your mentor does not have to look like you. The expression, all skin is not kin. You go by the heart and not by the skin. And I think that's a good piece of advice. Be very judicious in mentors that you seek out, and follow your gut, follow your instinct, because just because they look like you does not necessarily mean they have your best interest at heart. Anyone else have any advice? I mean, this is a good way. We'll go right into Mr. Powell. He ushered us right there as taking over my job as moderator. That's all right. We will go right there and see who else has advice for those who are going into the workforce these days.
I just wanted to acknowledge the question in the chat from Tyra. What advice do you have for locating organizations that are already doing good work, so we are not always working? Sweetheart, I don't know if I have a good answer for that one. What I always tell people is that you have to be a change agent wherever you go. This idea of a perfect organization does not exist. Mm-hmm. The best thing you could do is find an organization that may be developing or have a semi-established protocol to deal with change agency, and is willing to do different things to create new structures that remove systemic barriers, to decentralize leadership, to create equity and voices, no matter how long or you've been there or what part of the organization you're in. But to try to find a perfect company, organization, or agency, you'll be looking for the rest of your days.
Yeah, there is no such thing as a perfect place.
Yeah,
there just really isn't.
I think also, I'm sure you're going to get this preparation within your career services, services while you're at Maryland. But I think also when you're interviewing or when you're doing your research for the job or career that you're looking for, do your homework. I mean, that's what I'm always looking for when I'm looking for a new candidate or recruiting or whatnot. Have they done their homework? And when you have that opportunity to interview, ask the right questions that you need. You need to also interview them as well. You need to also get the information that you need. Because to me, in my mind, looking for a new job or a new career is very much like a marriage. It needs to be some shared upon passions, agreements, understandings. And I think that kind of goes back to what the moderator was saying with the mentorship. It doesn't always have to just be around the melanin in somebody's skin, but are you aligned with the heart issues, the moral issues, making sure that alignment is there. But I think you also need to know that you're also in the driver's seat when you're in the interview, that you're also interviewing them and asking those pointed questions that are aligned to what you need and what you want, so that the marriage relationship for that professional relationship during that time or during that season is one that is successful and moving forward, not just the company, but also yourself as well.
And I'm going to apply this question to everyone, but Mr. Powell brought it up. When you say do your homework, what exactly do you mean?
Well, this is not necessarily the entirety of the homework, but I think that one thing that you should be looking at, especially for a private company, is the mission and how they spend their discretionary money. So, like, where are they putting their investments? Where are they directing their work to? So, like, in order to understand what their work is aligned with, you need to know their mission and their vision and their goals. So that's one thing that you should be looking at in your homework.
Okay. I see you do have some questions coming in. That's great. One question that came in earlier, we won't get to them, but one question that came in earlier is, how do you identify a mentor? How do you identify a mentor? I know I found my mentors through not so much where I worked, but through organizations, journalism organizations. And I was able to find people who don't work where I work with, elsewhere across the country, who could talk to me about how to, the stepping ladder and how to climb. But how does one find a mentor? Do you go up to somebody and say, "Will you be my mentor?" How do you find that person?
I think it depends on what season I am. So if I'm looking at it from the lens of a college student, at that time, a lot of my mentors were my professors or were my deans. I've always taken the philosophy is, I'm not going to have a mentor that's in my group. If you're the strongest person in your group, you need a new group. So for me, I always look at what's the next level. So if I am a student, I'm looking at my professors or who's at the top, as far as the dean. So I would kind of want to go to the top. If it's when I'm out as a teacher, I'm going to look at other teachers in districts where I want to serve. I'm a very aggressive person. So I'm one of those people, I'm on LinkedIn. Hey, I want to be a superintendent one day. So I'm going to start connecting with superintendents and find those who, again, have passions and interests that are aligned to mine. When I was a teacher, I would go to conferences and I would connect with other teachers or teacher leaders that were doing work that was a step above where I was. Because again, it's almost like that iron sharpens iron. You want to find that, if you will. If you need help in finding somebody that you're already linked with and have them, do you know other people in your sphere of influence that would be good individuals for me to connect with? I think you have to use, I'm one of those people. I think I'd rather have social capital than financial capital any day. I can get fired today, but because I have strong social capital, I can get a job tomorrow, literally. So I think it's how are you developing those relationships and not doing brown nosing, but also being authentic, because then people will be gravitated to you. A lot of the mentorship that I've gotten, they reached out to me. Hey, I heard about what you were doing, or I saw this, or I saw that, or they take a liking to you, very similar to professors, very similar to, people in your community, but find out what it is that you're interested in and put yourself in those circles. To me, especially in this DMV area, I'm not from here, I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky. You have to be aggressive. And if you're not aggressive, you have to use the social capital that you do have to get out there, because the game is very competitive. I hate to say it like a game, but I feel like maybe the other professionals on here would speak to that. You have to kind of broaden your network beyond the melanin in your skin, but also the people that, as has already been stated, things are aligned to your passion, whether it's your mentors or your colleagues, and start wherever your watering hole is. But I'm sure other people have other strategies or suggestions as well.
And we have about a good 5-10 minutes left, and we got some more questions here. I want to get to them real quick. One question from Jason Barber. See it, if a Caucasian coworker tells you that they are being discriminated against by other coworkers in a predominantly Black environment, and you are an African American in authority position, supervisor, how would you handle this? Anyone?
For me, I would sit down with that individual and just really try to understand and be a ear for that person. Number one, when anybody says that they're discriminated against or they're being people are misbehaving towards them or treating them lesser than, it is time to lend an ear. It is time to really think about what they're saying and try your best to get to the root of the problem. It's not necessarily a time to go into a lesson about critical race theory and teach people how there's no such thing as reverse racism. Like maybe it's not the time to hear that, but it's really, I want to hear what the heart of the matter is so that I can understand what the problem is. I think sometimes there are things that are elevated to discrimination, which can be resolved through simple conflict resolution. Because to be honest with you, our society just has a problem with being civil with each other, period. I'll be honest with you. I've been in predominantly white institutions where I've seen white people treat other white people terrible, right? And so, so then, I mean, we're going to scream racism then? I mean, so it's just about being able to teach people to be civil, understand what's happening with that person so I can be the best support system I can to that person, and to encourage them so they can continue to excel.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Thank you for your question. I appreciate it. So let's talk a little bit about, again, advice for moving forward. We're graduating college. What's the one piece of advice that you wish someone had given you when you graduated college and you were entering the workforce?
Well, I think I received this piece of advice, not in so many words, but I think the one thing I'd say is know your worth. So understanding how much your work is worth, how much your experience is worth, and what you're bringing to a company. Maybe that's monetarily, so like in your initial negotiation process, there's that, but then also kind of going forward. It's kind of like a consistent or constant negotiation when it comes to like either promotions, raises, when it comes to that point where you're deciding whether you can, if there is some sort of discrimination or you're feeling kind of stifled in your current position, whether you can negotiate improvements to that or whether you need to find somewhere else to go. So I think knowing your worth and knowing when it's time to either cut ties or ask for a better situation. So I think that's probably the one piece of advice that I would give.
Yeah. For me, it's always, be hungry. I was, come in early, stay late, and just be the one that shines in their work. Be that person who they can count on to get the job done and to want to do more. You're not just doing your job, but okay, I've done it. What can I do? You want to be the point person that they're always throwing a ball to. That's, to me, is what makes somebody shine as a star. You gotta show off that you got that fire in the belly. And I guarantee you, supervisors are looking for people who have that fire in the belly, who are self-motivating, who are strong and critical thinkers. So that's what I would encourage anyone. Brandon Lucas, what about you?
Yeah, but I was going to add, I always tell people, never cut yourself short. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, my only experience was doing, I delivered pizzas or I did X, Y, Z. Every experience you have is unique, is going to be transferable. You learn the skill set in that job or that internship or whatever it may be that's going to take you very far. So don't cut yourself short. I remember on my resume, I had that I worked at a moon bounce place, and that I had that on my resume when I applied for PwC. So just look at your experience that you have and really tailor and sell your story and your skills that you gain from it. And then just echoing some of the things that were said already. Once you land that job, just don't let your foot off the pedal. Keep pushing hard, keep trying to impress. Just because you got the job, there's still a lot more to prove. There's a lot more to show. And that's going to really accelerate your career growth if you keep your foot on the gas.
Mr. Powell?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, I would definitely co-sign everything that's been stated thus far. I can't say it enough, advice, make sure you go after a mentor. In some shape, form, or fashion. So that's number one. Number two, retirement and financial literacy. I know you're just now getting into the game, but please make sure that you do your homework when you get on to whatever institution or organization that you work for. Ask the questions about benefits, retirement, and put a plan in place. Start working backwards. Where do I want to be 30 years from now? Because especially your generation, a lot of people's retirement and what their systems look like now, it's not too hot. So you need to do some long-term planning, if you will, as far as retirement and financial literacy. I would also say, and just kind of put a different spin on it as far as exposure. When you get in, even if it's a low-level position or whatever, learn every aspect of that role. Yes, when I got into this, I was a teacher, but I wanted to know about the building. How's the building function? I'm talking about the physical structure. What's the finances? I want to know about that. What's the law and the policies? I wanted to know what my boss knew. so that I was prepared for those openings when they came open. So I was prepared and exposing myself to things that would challenge me. And I think this kind of gets back to the other points that other people have made. Continuously challenge yourself, keep grinding so that new doors will open up. Because I would have told you when I got out of college as, you know, an elementary major with a math background, oh, I just want to be that teacher that's been teaching, you know, in the district for 44 years with the cardigan feeding the birds that look like the black Mr. Rogers. That's what I wanted. But I'm also, to kind of give you a backdrop, when I was in school at K-12, I didn't read my first book until my freshman year in college. Now, wrap your mind around that statement. Here you have a young African-American female who's now an elementary principal who didn't read his first book until freshman year in college. So I wasn't even thinking about being a teacher. You know, I was playing ball in college. Like, I just wanted to play ball and go to math classes. But I was limiting myself on what I was doing and what I could do. And then I had a mentor at the time. My professor was like, hey, I think you'd be a really good teacher. I never thought about being a teacher. I didn't want to be a teacher. I hated school. But here I am, ugly duckling to swan in education. And it just continued to open up more doors. So I would say keep your mind open to the talents and gifts, I'm going to use my words, that God has bestowed upon you to do this work and service. And then all the other doors will open up for you. If you're doing your passion and you're doing what you've been called to do, and you'll know, everything else will kind of open up and people will be attracted to you. That's why I use the metaphor as far as marriage.
Mr. Martinez, your final word on this.
First of all, I'd like to say amen to that. And just to understand that you have to create a professional vision for yourself. It's never too early to create a professional vision for yourself. And as you continue to educate yourself in undergrad, get internships, read, build your mentorship network, because I have a network of mentors. I don't have one. There's not one person that's sharp for me to just be under that person all the time. It's a network. Then your professional vision will change as you inform it. But if you don't have a vision, what are you looking at? You're just wandering, right? And I know because I wandered plenty. So what I'm telling you is create a professional vision for yourself, allow your studies, allow your work experiences, allow your internship experiences to inform that vision. And if you have a different vision from right now that you have by the time you graduate, well, that's what's supposed to happen. It's supposed to change, but have one, right? So that way it'll motivate you. And if I could talk to freshman Omar at College Park, who used to live in elegant dorms and acted a fool half the time, I would tell him, you are so much better than that. You are just so much better than that, right? And this idea of Black excellence versus white mediocrity is so real. And if you don't believe it, you'll learn. Live a little while and you'll see it for yourself.
Ms. Brody, did you get a chance to respond to this? Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Ms. Brody, did you get a chance? You did? Okay. And you all brought up internships. You got 2 minutes. You brought up internships. Please do not wait until your senior or junior years or start applying for internships. Apply for internships as a freshman. Even if you don't get your foot in the door, at least the recruiters will know who you are, so that when you are juniors and seniors, they will bring you in as an intern. But do not wait until your junior or senior year. By then, it really is too late. You know, go in as a freshman, all right, and then apply for those jobs. Again, that's all for our time. Thank you. I'm trying to keep on time. Ms. Woods, thank you for having us here, and the University of Maryland, thank you for inviting us. Ms. Woods, is she still out there?
Here. Yeah.
I'm gonna let you have the final say.
I thank all of you. I'm going to pop in and say, in case you happen to be a junior or a senior and you are just now starting an internship, just come talk to us. We got you. So come, I say come to the Career Center, but you know what I mean. Virtually contact us. And you've gotten emails from me in relation to this event, so you know how to connect with me. I did want to let you know that 2 other events on November 9th, Monday. We do have a final event in the series, Working While Black career series. And if you want to come and get some motivational advice, I recommend that you come and you tell your friends. This is going to give you some stuff, some food, in case you ever need to get motivated or pump yourself up. I've seen this gentleman speak. He's also a TERP alum and you should come join us for that. So that's going to be also at 6 o'clock. And also since financial literacy came up during this conversation, we also have on December 8th, which is a Tuesday, and that's at 4:30. I just checked and it doesn't happen to be on our calendar now, but it'll be up there by tomorrow. And you'll be able to register for Earn It, Plan It, Keep It, because I wish I had some advice and guidance when I first got out of school about how to begin to save money. What are some of the things that you just never knew about? For instance, and you might have heard about this, but when you get your degree, if they haven't started already, all the credit card companies start inviting you to open up an account. I was so excited. I bought furniture and my first bill, all they wanted was $27. And that hurt my feelings later on when I saw how much interest accrued. So there's so much good material that we can show you as you're starting to first get your real money. And how you can plan to create wealth for yourself. So please come back. I am so happy that you all were here. If you all have, you check out our events calendar at careers.umd.edu for additional and upcoming events. I thank you very much. Our panelists and moderator are putting their contact information in the chat if any students want to reach out to them for further advice, guidance, or mentors. Who knows? So you got your marching orders right now. Thanks again, all of you all, for joining us. Any parting last words from anybody? One last anything? If not, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again on the next workshop. Appreciate y'all. Bye.